Mail order bride arrived a day too late. The cowboy said, "You're right on time for me." John wiped the sweat from his brow and stepped back to look at the ranch. The morning sun painted the wide fields in shades of gold and green, and the quiet hum of life filled the air. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind moved gently through the tall grass. The ranch had been his home for most of his life. It was a place of hard work, solitude, and small joys. Yet despite everything he had built, John felt a gap in his heart, a space only someone else could fill. He had written countless letters to Alina over the past few months, carefully choosing every word, imagining her smile as she read them. Each letter had carried his hopes, his fears, and a quiet longing for companionship. Now, finally, the day had come for her to arrive. John checked his watch for the third time that morning. The train from the nearby town was supposed to arrive just after dawn. He had been awake before the first light, preparing for her arrival. He had polished the porch, swept the dirt paths, and even tidied the small guest room where Alina would stay. Every detail mattered because he wanted her first impression to be perfect. Yet as the minutes turned into hours, a shadow of worry crept into his heart. The train was late. He stood by the fence, leaning on the wooden post, and scanned the horizon. A faint curl of smoke rose from the town in the distance, the train station just beyond it. He wondered if she was sitting in the train, anxious or tired from the long journey. Maybe she had encountered delays, or perhaps the train itself had broken down. John shook his head, trying to push away the thoughts. He reminded himself that travel was unpredictable, and the storm the night before had made the roads muddy and dangerous. Yet the quiet ranch felt heavier with each passing moment. The birds' songs seemed distant, and even the wind felt hesitant. Back inside the small house, John poured himself a cup of coffee. He sat by the window, watching the sun climb slowly into the sky. The smell of brewed coffee filled the room, comforting him, but he couldn't shake the nervous tension that had settled in his chest. He took a deep breath and looked around the space he had prepared for her. The guest room was simple but neat. A clean bed, fresh sheets, and a small vase with wildflowers he had picked that morning. He had thought carefully about every detail. He wanted her to feel welcome, to know that she had a place here, that she was expected, and most importantly, that she was safe. Time passed slowly. John went outside again, checking the fence lines and the barns, pretending to keep busy. Each sound in the distance made him glance toward the tracks. Was that the train? Or just a carriage from the nearby farm? His heart leaped with each possible sound and sank again with disappointment. He tried to distract himself with chores, but every task felt incomplete without knowing she had arrived. He thought back to the letters they had exchanged. Alina's words had been gentle yet strong, filled with hope, curiosity, and courage. She had written about her life back home, the small town she left behind, the family she missed, and her dreams for the future. Every letter revealed her character, kind, thoughtful, and brave. John often read the letters aloud to himself, imagining her voice, imagining her smile. Sometimes he found himself laughing at her stories, and sometimes he felt a pang of sadness thinking about her loneliness and sacrifices. He wondered if she had traveled through the night, tired and uncertain, carrying the hope that their connection was real. By late morning, the sun had risen high and the air was warmer. John wiped the sweat from his forehead again. The storm from the previous night had left puddles in the yard, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. He walked along the edge of the barn, checking the animals, but his mind kept drifting to Alina. Would she like the ranch? Would she feel comfortable here? Or would the distance, the work, and the quiet life feel too much for her? He shook his head, trying to chase away the doubts. He reminded himself that she had chosen this journey just as he had chosen her. As the afternoon approached, the train still hadn't arrived. John sat on the porch, resting his elbows on his knees, staring down the dusty road that led to the station. He thought about how long he had waited for this moment, not just the arrival, but the chance to meet someone who could become part of his life. He had lived a life of routine, chores, animals, the vast open fields, and the occasional visit to town. Yet, all the beauty of the ranch felt incomplete without someone to share it with. The thought of being alone for another day weighed heavily on him. He imagined her arriving, tired and worried, and not seeing him there. What if she thought he didn't care? What if she felt unwelcome? These thoughts made his chest tighten. John stood and walked toward the road again, hoping to catch the first sight of the train. He paused, squinting against the sunlight, but all he could see was the familiar landscape of fields and distant hills. The station remained empty, and the quiet stretched endlessly. As the afternoon faded into early evening, John decided to return to the house. The golden sunlight cast long shadows across the yard, and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers and hay. He opened the door to the guest room, looking around at the small space prepared for Alina. Everything was ready, but the emptiness made him feel more aware of his solitude. He walked slowly through the house, touching the edge of the table, the window sill, and the door frame. Each object was familiar, comforting, and yet incomplete. He poured himself another cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. The quiet was almost deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the house settling. He looked out the window, imagining Alina stepping off the train, unsure, holding her bag, glancing around for him. He wanted to be there, waiting, smiling, ready to welcome her. The thought of missing that moment, even for a day, made his heart ache. As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, John stepped back outside. The air had cooled and the first evening stars began to appear. He leaned against the fence, watching the horizon, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. He thought about the letters, the phone calls, the planning, and the hopes that had carried him through the months of waiting. And even though the day had not gone as planned, he found a quiet determination in his heart. He whispered to himself, "Maybe tomorrow you'll be here. Maybe tomorrow will be the day we meet." He knew that life didn't always follow plans. Delays, mistakes, and unforeseen circumstances were part of it. But what mattered most was the connection they had built, the trust, and the hope that had carried them both to this point. As night fell, John made one last round of the ranch, checking the animals, closing the barn doors, and feeding the horses. The moon rose high above the fields, casting silver light over the land. He stood outside, looking up at the stars, imagining Alina reading a letter by candlelight, thinking of him as he thought of her. He felt the distance between them, but also the strength of the bond that had grown despite miles and delays. Finally, he returned to the house and sat by the window, sipping the last of his coffee. He thought about the journey ahead, the first meeting, and the days that would follow. Despite the disappointment of the delay, he felt a quiet optimism. Tomorrow, the train would arrive. Tomorrow, Alina would step onto the ranch. And perhaps, just perhaps, everything would fall into place exactly as it was meant to. He turned off the light in the kitchen and went to the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed he had prepared for her. He looked around, imagining her unpacking, making the space her own, and sharing her first smile with him. He whispered softly to himself, "I'll wait. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait." The night was calm, the ranch silent, and the stars shone brightly above. John felt a strange mixture of loneliness and hope. He knew that patience was part of life on the ranch, but tonight, it was more than that. It was a waiting filled with expectation, longing, and the quiet certainty that life sometimes brings people together at the perfect moment, even if the timing is delayed. As he drifted off to sleep, he dreamed of tomorrow. The day Alina would arrive, the day he would see her for the first time, and the day the waiting would finally end. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that no matter what, the gap in his heart would soon begin to close. Scent light of morning spilled over the ranch, painting the fields in gold and amber. John had barely slept. The thought of Alina finally arriving made his heart beat faster than it had in years. He rose early, brushing his teeth, pulling on his worn boots and stepping outside into the crisp morning air. The ranch seemed to hold its breath, as if it too was waiting for her. He walked along the porch, adjusting the small vase of wildflowers he had picked the previous day, making sure everything looked perfect. Then, in the distance, he saw her. Alina stepped off the dusty path that led from the train station, carrying a modest bag. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and the sunlight caught the strands in a soft glow. She paused, taking in the sight of the ranch and the man who was watching her from the porch. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. Every worry and every letter they had sent each other came rushing back in his mind. John took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. He walked down the steps and onto the path, boots crunching softly on the dirt. Alina saw him moving toward her, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel hope instead of fear. She had traveled far, unsure of what to expect, and now, seeing him in person, something inside her shifted. "Good morning," John said, his voice calm but warm. His eyes met hers and a small smile appeared. "You're right on time for me." Alina blinked in surprise. She had feared disappointment, perhaps anger, for being a day late, but the gentle words and the calm look in his eyes melted away all doubt. A smile slowly spread across her face. I'm glad to hear that," she said softly, her voice a little shaky from travel and nerves. He stepped closer, reaching out to help her with her bag. Alina handed it over, feeling the weight of the journey lift from her shoulders. The two of them stood for a moment, silent, observing each other. She noticed the calluses on his hands, the strong stance, and the quiet confidence he carried. John noticed the slight tremor in her fingers, the careful way she adjusted her scarf, and the determination in her eyes. They walked together toward the house. The path was lined with wildflowers, and the air smelled faintly of hay and morning dew. John kept the conversation light, pointing out the barns, the animals, and the small details of ranch life. Alina listened, asking questions and laughing at some of his small jokes. The initial awkwardness slowly gave way to a tentative comfort, as if they were both realizing that this meeting, delayed though it was exactly where they were meant to be. Inside the house, John showed her to the guest room. It was simple, neat, and welcoming. Alina set her bag down on the bed and took a moment to look around. Everything was, as he had described in his letters, yet seeing it in person gave it a sense of reality that made her heart flutter. She ran her fingers over the quilt he had laid out, admiring the way it smelled faintly of fresh linen and home. John watched her quietly. He could feel the tension in her shoulders slowly easing, and that gave him a sense of relief. "I thought you might like the room," he said. "I wanted you to feel comfortable." "It's perfect," she replied, a shy smile on her lips. "Thank you." Breakfast was a simple affair. John had prepared eggs, bread, and coffee. They sat at the small kitchen table, and as they ate, they began to talk more openly. Alina told stories of her hometown, of the small streets and familiar smells, of friends and family she missed dearly. John listened, occasionally sharing small pieces of his own life. How he had grown up on the ranch, the work it took to keep it running, and the quiet nights he had spent alone, wishing for companionship. The conversation flowed easily, though there were pauses where both seemed unsure what to say next. Yet, in those pauses, there was a silent understanding, a recognition that they were both stepping into a new chapter of life together. Alina noticed how gentle John was, how his words were deliberate, and how he seemed to care not just for her presence but for her comfort and feelings. John noticed how brave Alina was, traveling alone to a new country, stepping into an unknown life, yet doing it with grace and strength. After breakfast, John suggested showing her around the ranch. Alina agreed eagerly. They walked together to the barn where the horses nickered softly. John led her to the stables, introducing each animal by name. Alina reached out to touch the soft coat of a mare, and the horse leaned into her hand, sensing her gentle nature. She laughed softly, a sound that made John's chest tighten pleasantly. As the day went on, John and Alina worked side by side, feeding animals, mending fences, and gathering firewood. Alina was careful at first, unsure of the right way to handle certain tasks, but John guided her patiently. He didn't rush her, didn't correct her sharply, and that made her feel more confident. By the afternoon, she was moving around the ranch with a quiet ease, learning the rhythms of life that John had known all his life. During a brief break, they sat under the shade of a large oak tree. The sun was warm on their faces, and the breeze carried the scent of hay and earth. John passed Alina a bottle of water, and she smiled, taking a sip. They sat in silence for a while, watching the cattle grazing in the distance. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like a shared moment of peace and connection. "You know," Alina said finally, "I was nervous coming here. I didn't know what to expect." John nodded. "I understand. I was nervous too. Meeting someone for the first time, it's not easy, but I think we'll be okay." Alina looked at him, noticing the sincerity in his eyes. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of safety and hope. "I hope so," she said softly. As the sun began to lower in the sky, John suggested they take a walk to the edge of the property. They strolled along the dirt road, the horses in the distance casting long shadows across the field. Alina felt the tension of travel and nerves melt away with each step. The landscape was beautiful, but it was the presence of John, walking beside her, that made it truly remarkable. They reached a small hill that overlooked the ranch. From there, they could see the entire property, the barns, the fields, and the distant road that led to the town. John leaned against a fence post, looking out at the view, then turned to Alina. "This is my world," he said. "It's simple, maybe even quiet, but it's home, and I want it to be home for you too if you want it." Alina felt a lump in her throat. She had left everything she knew behind, crossed miles of land and uncertainty, and now, here she was, standing on a hill with a man she had only known through letters, and yet she felt a strange sense of belonging. I want that," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions rising in her chest. John smiled, a quiet, heartfelt smile. "Good," he said, "because I think we're going to be all right." They stayed there for a while, talking about dreams, hopes, and the small things that made life meaningful. They laughed at small stories, shared quiet moments of thought, and for the first time truly saw each other. Not just the idea of each other in letters, but the real person standing before them. As evening approached, John led Alina back to the house. The sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and purple. The ranch glowed in the soft light of the setting sun. Alina felt a deep sense of calm, a sense that despite the delays, despite the uncertainty, she was exactly where she was meant to be. Inside the house, John prepared a simple dinner and they ate together by the kitchen table. Conversation flowed easily now, filled with laughter and curiosity. Alina shared more about her life, and John listened with genuine interest. They discussed everything from daily routines to hopes for the future, and with each word they built a foundation of trust and understanding. After dinner, they sat by the fireplace. The flames crackled softly, casting warm light across the room. Alina felt tired from travel, but not in a way that made her want to rest. She felt tired in a contented way, a feeling that came from a long day of meaningful work, conversation, and connection. John noticed the slight slump in her shoulders and offered her a blanket. She accepted and they sat quietly, the comfort of shared presence filling the room. Before turning in for the night, they talked about the next day, the routines of the ranch, and small plans for getting to know each other better. Alina felt a quiet joy, knowing that the man who had waited for her, worried about her, and prepared for her arrival, was not only kind but genuinely cared about her. John felt a similar joy, seeing Alina smile, laugh, and settle into the ranch with a sense of ease he hadn't expected so soon. As she climbed into the guest room, Alina looked around once more, feeling a warmth that came from the sense of being welcomed, seen, and valued. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the letters, the travel, and the waiting, and she realized that every step had been worth it. John paused at the doorway, watching her settle. He felt a quiet contentment, knowing that despite the delay, despite the long wait, this moment was perfect. Tomorrow, they would continue to learn about each other, continue to share moments, and continue to build a life together. But for tonight, the first meeting had been everything they both had hoped for, and more. He whispered softly to himself as he turned to leave, right on time after all. Roosters crowed, cattle lowed in the distance, and the wind whispered through the fields. John rose before the sun, as usual, but today he felt a different energy. Alina was awake too, and the thought of spending another day with her made his heart lighter. He dressed quickly, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside. The air was crisp and clean, and the sky was a soft shade of pink. Alina joined him a few moments later, carrying a small basket of eggs she had collected from the henhouse. She had moved with a quiet confidence, and John could see that the ranch life was starting to feel familiar to her. She smiled when she saw him, and he returned the smile, noticing how her eyes lit up in the morning sun. "Good morning," John said, his voice calm and warm. "Ready for a busy day?" "I think so," Alina replied, laughing softly. "I want to learn everything, even if I make mistakes." John shook his head, smiling. "No mistakes, only learning." They began the day with the animals. John showed her how to feed the cattle, check the water troughs, and inspect the fences for damage. Alina listened carefully, asking questions and following his instructions. She was careful but eager, moving with a mix of nervousness and determination. John noticed how quickly she learned, and he felt a quiet pride. By mid-morning, they moved to the barn. John showed Alina how to groom the horses, explaining how each one had a different personality and how they responded to care. Alina laughed as one of the horses nuzzled her shoulder, and John chuckled at her surprise. The horses seemed to sense her gentle nature, and she quickly developed a connection with them. "You have a way with them," John said quietly, watching her brush a brown mare. "They trust you." Alina looked up, a hint of embarrassment in her smile. I guess I just like animals, she said softly. John nodded, sensing the honesty in her words. That's all that matters. The morning passed in a series of small tasks, feeding animals, repairing a fence, carrying water to the fields. Alina worked diligently, and John noticed how her confidence grew with each chore. They worked together as a team, their movements gradually becoming more in sync. Occasionally, their hands would brush while passing a bucket or lifting hay, and a small spark would pass between them, subtle but undeniable. During a short break, they sat under the shade of a large tree, drinking water and catching their breath. The sun was warm, and a soft breeze carried the scent of hay and wildflowers. John watched Alina, noticing the way her eyes scanned the fields, taking in the beauty of the ranch, and he felt a deep admiration for her courage and patience. "You're doing really well," John said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I wasn't sure how you'd handle the work, but you're learning fast." Alina smiled, a faint blush on her cheeks. "I have a good teacher," John laughed softly. "I hope so. But don't forget, you're teaching me too. You remind me that there's more to life than just work." Alina looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. She realized that despite their short time together, they were beginning to understand each other in a way that words alone could not convey. As the day wore on, they faced a small challenge. A young calf had wandered too close to the edge of the pasture, near a low fence that was damaged from a storm. John and Alina ran toward it, calling softly to calm the animal. Alina felt a pang of fear as the calf stumbled near the fence, but John remained steady, guiding her and offering reassurance. Together, they led the calf back to safety, securing the fence to prevent future accidents. "That wasn't so bad," John said, wiping sweat from his brow. "See, we make a good team." Alina laughed, her nerves easing. "We do. I didn't think I could do it, but with you it feels possible." The experience brought them closer. They shared a sense of accomplishment and trust, realizing that together they could handle challenges, no matter how small or daunting. The day continued with lighter tasks, watering the garden, collecting firewood, and preparing a simple lunch. Each moment was filled with conversation, laughter, and shared effort. After lunch, John suggested they walk to the nearby creek, a quiet spot he often visited to think. Alina agreed, and they strolled along the path, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the sound of flowing water. The creek was clear and cool, and they dipped their hands in the water, laughing at the sudden chill. They sat on a large rock, their feet dangling above the water, and talked about their lives. Alina shared stories of her childhood, her family, and the dreams she had left behind. John listened, offering words of comfort and understanding, occasionally sharing small details about his own life. They spoke about hopes for the future, about what they wanted in a partner, and about the kind of life they imagined together. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," John said quietly, looking out at the creek. "Someone who understands, who's patient and brave." I didn't think this was possible." Alina felt a warmth in her chest. "I feel the same," she said softly. "I was scared to come here, but now I feel like this is where I'm meant to be." They sat in silence for a while, watching the water flow and feeling the gentle breeze. The connection between them was growing stronger with each shared word, each glance, and each small moment of understanding. It was a bond built not just on words, but on trust, patience, and shared experience. As the afternoon faded into evening, they returned to the ranch. John showed Alina how to light the fireplace, and together they prepared a simple meal. The kitchen was filled with the smell of warm bread and cooked vegetables, and the soft glow of the fire cast shadows across the room. They ate slowly, savoring not just the food, but the comfort of each other's presence. After dinner, they stepped outside to watch the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the ranch seemed to glow in the fading light. John and Alina stood side by side, taking in the beauty of the moment. Alina felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. She realized that the delays, the long journey, and the uncertainty had all led her to this exact moment. John looked at her, noticing the quiet contentment in her expression. "You know," he said softly, "I wasn't sure how this would go. Meeting someone for the first time, living together, learning about each other, it's not easy. But I think we're going to be all right." Alina turned to him, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "I think so too," she said. "I've never felt this way before, but it feels right." They walked back to the house as the stars began to appear in the night sky. The air was cool, carrying the scent of hay and earth. Inside, John made them tea, and they sat by the fireplace, talking quietly about the day. They shared small moments of laughter, stories, and reflections on their lives. Each word, each glance, each smile built a foundation of trust and understanding between them. Before heading to bed, they stepped outside once more. The moon cast a soft silver light over the fields, and the ranch was peaceful and quiet. Alina felt a sense of belonging, a feeling that she had not experienced in a long time. John felt a similar peace, knowing that despite the challenges, despite the distance and uncertainty, this connection was real and meaningful. As they said goodnight, Alina whispered softly, "Thank you for everything today, for being patient, for guiding me, for trusting me." John smiled, a quiet warmth in his eyes. "And thank you for coming, for trying, and for being here. We'll figure this out together." They parted for the night, each carrying a sense of hope and anticipation for the days to come. The ranch was quiet, the stars twinkling above, and the wind whispered through the fields. It was the end of another day, but also the beginning of a deeper connection, a growing trust, and the quiet promise of a shared life. In the darkness of the guest room, Alina lay awake for a while, thinking about the day. She felt tired, yes, but also exhilarated. She had faced challenges, learned new things, and felt moments of joy she hadn't expected. Most importantly, she had felt seen, respected, and valued. She smiled softly to herself, knowing that this was the start of something meaningful. John, in his own room, looked out at the ranch and thought of Alina. He felt a deep sense of relief and happiness. The day had been long and full of work, but it had also been filled with connection, laughter, and shared experiences. He knew that they were learning not just about the ranch, but about each other, and that knowledge was building a foundation stronger than any fence or barn he had ever built. The night was calm, the ranch peaceful, and the stars bright above. John and Alina slept with the quiet certainty that tomorrow would bring more shared moments, more challenges, and more opportunities to grow closer. They were no longer strangers. They were partners, learning together, supporting each other, and beginning to build a life rooted in trust, respect, and care. The next morning, the ranch woke gently with the soft sounds of life. Birds sang in the trees, and the distant lowing of cattle carried across the fields. John rose early, as he always did, but today he felt a quiet excitement in his chest. Alina had been with him for a few days now, and the connection between them had grown stronger. The first nervousness and uncertainty had given way to a sense of partnership, comfort, and trust. Alina joined him outside, carrying a small basket of freshly gathered eggs. Her movements were steady and confident, showing that she had begun to understand the rhythm of life on the ranch. She smiled at John, and he returned the smile, noticing the ease and warmth in her eyes. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning," Alina replied. "I'm ready for the day." Today, John had planned to take her to the nearby town. It was a small place, just a few streets, a general store, and a post office, but it was a place John visited often. He wanted Alina to see more of the world around the ranch and to experience a little of daily life beyond the fields and barns. They walked together along the dirt road, the sun warm on their faces. Alina noticed the subtle details, the smell of fresh bread from a bakery, the laughter of children playing near the town square, and the friendly waves of neighbors who knew John. She felt a sense of belonging, a feeling that she was slowly becoming part of this life. At the general store, John introduced Alina to the owner, a kind woman named Martha. Martha welcomed her warmly, chatting about the weather, the animals, and the small events in town. Alina felt at ease, enjoying the simple kindness of people who treated her like a friend rather than a stranger. John watched her quietly, noticing the way she smiled and interacted with the townspeople, and he felt a surge of pride. She was brave, kind, and capable, and she fit naturally into this world he loved. After visiting the town, they returned to the ranch. The sun was high, and the air carried the warmth of midday. John suggested they check the fences and water troughs before lunch. As they worked, Alina asked questions, eager to learn more about the ranch and the animals. John answered patiently, showing her not only how to do things but also why they were done a certain way. Around midday, they stopped under the shade of a large oak tree, sharing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and fresh fruit. They laughed over small stories from the morning, and the ease between them felt natural, comfortable, and real. Alina felt a sense of peace she had not known in a long time, a feeling of being truly understood and welcomed. After lunch, A small challenge arose. A storm had passed overnight, and one section of the fence had been damaged. A few cattle had wandered close to the forest edge, and John realized they needed to act quickly to prevent them from straying further. Alina felt a moment of worry, but John took her hand and reassured her. "We can do this together," he said, step by step. Together, they worked to fix the fence. John held the wood steady while Alina hammered the boards into place. At first, her movements were hesitant, but with John guiding her and encouraging her, she gained confidence. The cattle watched from a distance, calm but curious as the two of them worked side by side. When the fence was secure, they stepped back to admire their work. Alina smiled, proud of what they had accomplished together. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with quiet joy. John nodded, smiling at her. "We make a good team. I think we can handle anything if we work together." The small challenge brought them even closer. They shared a sense of accomplishment, trust, and mutual respect. Alina realized that life on the ranch was not just about hard work. It was about connection, teamwork, and shared purpose. John realized that with Alina by his side, the ranch, the animals, and even the long, quiet evenings felt richer, warmer, and more meaningful. As the afternoon faded into evening, they decided to take a walk to their favorite spot, a hill that overlooked the entire ranch. From there, they could see the barns, the fields, the distant road, and the forest edge. The sun was setting, casting golden and pink hues across the sky, and the land glowed in the soft light. They sat together on a large rock, their shoulders brushing, feeling the comfort of each other's presence. John looked at Alina, noticing the gentle determination in her eyes, the soft curve of her smile, and the warmth in her expression. "You know," he said quietly, "I wasn't sure how this would go. Meeting someone, learning about each other, sharing a life, it's not easy. But I think we were meant to find each other." Alina felt her heart swell. "I believe that too," she said softly. "Even with the delays, the travel, and the uncertainty, I feel like everything led me here, to you, to this place, to this life." John reached out, taking her hand in his. The connection was quiet but strong, a promise of partnership and care. They stayed there, watching the sunset, talking about their hopes, their dreams, and the small plans for the future. Each word, each glance, each shared moment built a deeper understanding between them. As night fell, they returned to the house. John prepared a simple dinner, and they ate by the fireplace, the room warm and cozy. Conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter, reflection, and the comfort of being with someone who truly understood you. After dinner, they stepped outside once more. The stars had emerged, bright and clear, scattered across the night sky. The ranch was quiet, bathed in silver light, and the air carried the scent of hay and earth. Alina felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that she was no longer alone, that she had found a place where she belonged. John watched her, feeling a quiet happiness he had not experienced in years. The days of solitude, the long hours of work, and the weight of loneliness seemed distant now. With Alina by his side, the ranch felt complete. The animals, the fields, and even the simple house were filled with warmth, life, and a sense of shared purpose. They returned to the living room and sat together by the fireplace, sharing tea and quiet conversation. Alina reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the decision to leave her home, the long travel, and the uncertainty of meeting a man she had only known through letters. She realized that every step had been worth it, for it had led her to this moment of connection, trust, and hope. John, in turn, thought about the past months, how he had waited, prepared, and hoped for this day. He felt gratitude that despite delays and uncertainties, Alina had arrived, and they had found each other. The bond they shared was no longer just imagined or written in letters. It was real, tangible, and growing stronger every day. Before going to bed, they stepped outside one last time. The moon cast a soft glow over the fields, and the night was calm. Alina leaned slightly against John, feeling the security and warmth of his presence. "Thank you," she whispered. "For trusting me, for welcoming me, for everything." John smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "Thank you," he replied. "For coming, for staying, and for being here. We'll figure this life out together, one day at a time." They went to their rooms, each carrying the quiet joy of knowing that their journey had only just begun. The ranch was peaceful, the stars bright, and the wind carried the gentle promise of tomorrow. Both Alina and John fell asleep with hearts full of hope, knowing that love, trust, and partnership had arrived exactly when it was meant to. The following days continued with shared routines, laughter, and the occasional small challenge. Each task, each meal, each walk across the fields became a shared experience, strengthening their connection. The initial nerves and uncertainties faded completely, replaced by comfort, respect, and the quiet understanding that they were building a life together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, John turned to Alina with a small gift in his hand, a simple locket he had kept for many years. Inside was a picture of the ranch and a note that read, "Home is where we are together." Alina accepted it with tears in her eyes, touched by the gesture and the meaning behind it. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." John nodded, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the sunset. "It's not just a gift," he said. "It's a promise. No matter what comes, we face it together." Alina leaned against him, feeling a deep sense of belonging. The delays, the long journey, the challenges, they all felt like small steps that had led to this perfect moment. Together, they had faced the unknown, learned about each other, and discovered a life filled with love, respect, and partnership. As night fell once more, the ranch was quiet, peaceful, and alive with the promise of tomorrow. John and Alina slept with the certainty that life had brought them together for a reason. The love they had found was patient, steady, and enduring. A reminder that sometimes, even when life seems delayed or uncertain, everything can fall perfectly into place. And as the stars twinkled above, John whispered to himself, just as he had the first day she arrived, "You were right on time for me."